Hey, everybody, welcome to the oppHERtunity podcast. We are joined by good friend Jackie Gutierrez, who is the founder of Women Kickballs, which is an amazing media company focused on the NWSL soccer league. So let's jump in and get to know Jackie a little bit.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, my name is Jackie Gutierrez. I'm the founder of Woman Kickballs, which is an independent media company that specifically covers women's soccer in the U.S. So from the NWSL to the U.S. Women's National Team. And yeah, I'm a one woman show, and I actually grew up playing soccer for about 10 years and always wanted to be a sports journalist, even though that wasn't a thing. I don't know how many years ago that was. And so at 17 years old, I started writing. And yeah, now 9 years later, I have my own company called Woman Kickballs. And it's still very much something where there's so much growth to happen, but I'm just so grateful for getting to have so many people from around the world who subscribe to my articles and getting to produce magazines, which was totally an accident, and going to lots of NWSL games. So, yeah, there's never a dull moment with what I do, but just very exciting to be able to connect with so many people because of soccer. So, yeah, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we came in contact too. I don't even know, maybe it was through
Social
like
media, maybe? I don't know.
something with social media, or maybe through like a Parkside thing or something with cards. Maybe I don't know how I found you, but I think something that's kind of going out of fashion a little bit too is like a hard print magazine, something that you can like tangibly hold. I have my volume one and my volume two here.
Nice.
I think right away, we're in San Diego, so I was like, oh, we got to have the Alex Morgan on the cover of
Yeah.
something. um but it was so cool, just even with my daughter, like flipping through all these amazing photos that you had taken during each season, and then we can get into the World Cup, which is its own like super amazing thing. But
Mhm.
kind of with your background, I kind of wanted to dive a little bit into like how do there wasn't a lot of yous when you were a kid to kind
Mhm.
of look up to and say, hey, this is what I want to do, and I know I can do it because so and so did it. You're kind of her, right?
Thanks. Yeah, in a way, I guess I kind of am, and I think that's the fun and challenging part. In fact, recently during the NWSL Championship weekend, I was talking with one of my clients, and we were talking, and he said, "You know, you chose a very difficult path," and I was like, "Yeah, thanks." I know he meant it well, just in that, like, yeah, it's hard being both a journalist in the media and then producing media for clients in the soccer industry because sometimes people can view that as a conflict. And so getting to really like, yeah, just pave this own career path that didn't really exist is really cool, but just also really hard too. So that's something where I'm always open about just really talking about the highs and the lows because a lot of times people see you at games taking photos or in a press conference setting and things like that, which is definitely at the heart of what I do, but there's so many long hours behind the scenes of like prepping questions for interviews or meeting with potential clients and like working on different projects. Or doing taxes, which is like keeping track of expenses, my least favorite part. So, like, so many things, and I definitely don't have it all figured out, but I just am very excited for the ways that, yeah, I look back at my 17-year-old self and I'm like living this life that I once like dreamed about and going to a World Cup. I mean, that was so like incredible to do this past summer. And so I still like can't get over that because my trip was fully funded by my readers as well. And so it's something where it's like, yeah, there's so many cool opportunities with it, but it's definitely different in general. Like I'm not a big name publication or I don't work for one in that sense of like having all my expenses paid for and having, all this figured out. Like I have to kind of problem solve and be creative in the things that I do. And now like write for Forbes as a contributing writer, which is really cool. But even that, there's a lot of challenges of like the pay structure. And you don't make as much money as you think. And so like just trying to be creative with what I do is yeah, just like the fun part of it, but something where I always just want to like yeah, give back to people because I know what it's like to not have that role model. And so now getting to like be that in a sense for other people is just like such a huge privilege because I feel like there's so many just incredible avenues of women's soccer. And so it's something where I don't take it for granted. I always want to like kind of surprise myself because I feel like when you keep just like chasing your goals and doing things that maybe you even are scared to do. Like you get to inspire other people or get to be that kind of example that other people get to look up to. And at the end of the day, like when we're all striving and reaching our highest potential, like we're only going to be doing better things in the soccer community too. So that's just how I see it. But yeah, definitely pretty wild to like, I don't know, be doing the things that I want to do. Being self-employed wasn't really part of the plan. It just kind of happened. So like I said, there's still a lot of growth and just things that I'm working on. But yeah, just super excited for like all the things that soccer has given me and the people that I've met from it too.
Well, so like, okay, so you played soccer, you realize, all right, maybe I'm not going to be in the NWSL one day, but I love this game. I want to be around the, the people, everything. I'm
Yeah.
into, media and journalism. What was like, you said the first thing you're like, hey, maybe I didn't know I was going to be this solo entrepreneur. But
Mhm.
what was the first step you took? You're 17, you're like, okay, I'm going for it. Like, what goes through your head, or like what was the very first thing you did you like run to like LegalZoom and like make an LLC, or like what did you do first?
Oh gosh, at 17, so I always talk about him, but my Uncle Joe was a guy who like really encouraged me to start writing at such a young age because in my mind I thought you go to school and study this particular thing and then you get a job and then your career starts. And my uncle had told me like, Jack, I think people really want to hear what you have to say. Like I think you should just start writing now. And so at 17 I just like got a free WordPress account and started writing and didn't even have a domain name actually, but yeah, it wasn't until 2019. I got a lot of internship experience in between that, but in 2019 is when I like sat down with my uncle, came up with the name Woman Kickballs, bought the domain and created this website and really kind of got the ball rolling in that sense. But yeah, ever since a young age, like I think it's so important to have people like your Uncle Joe because if it wasn't for him, like I wouldn't be, I don't think, doing what I'm doing. So I think there's so many different like I don't know, approaches or steps in terms of like how you want to start your business or start your career. But that was just, I needed someone to like kind of push me in a way because I feel like your parents, and I'm very grateful to have parents that are like this, where they will like anything I do, they're like, oh, that's so cool. Like, yeah, you can do anything. And you're like, okay, great. But having that additional voice with my uncle just really, I think, pushed me in a good way. So that was like step one. And then after that, I just kept writing and showing up in terms of like, writing articles even when I didn't think people were reading them. And so I think that's like another important thing that people can do. And then yeah, the rest has just kind of happened since then. But I've never had like any handouts or anything. Like I've put in a lot of work of making connections and I'm from a very small town in Southern California. So I didn't know people in the soccer industry. Like I just had to like figure it out and like reach out to people and show up to games, and that's kind of how a lot of it has started. So I feel like with the NWSL growing, like nowadays people and young kids can have so many opportunities to access women's soccer in a way that like I didn't grow up going to NWSL games because we didn't have teams in Southern California, and now that's so normal. We have two teams, another one in Northern California. So I feel like the possibilities are endless, but yeah, taking that first step can be kind of tough. So I feel like depending on people's goals or just what they want to do, like find yourself an Uncle Joe and just start there. Like that's probably the best and easiest thing that you can do.
Well, okay, so you're like, was there like a surreal moment the first time, we're post 2019, obviously, then you have these like that COVID struggle, like there was no games, there was nothing to go to.
Right.
What was it like when you like sat down in like your very first post game press conference? Was it like this surreal, like, oh my God, I'm actually here. I'm sure you were prepared, but was there something where you're like, oh my God, like I'm here. Like now what do I do?
Yeah, it was pretty wild going from like covering just US Women's national team like once a year when they came to LA, and with COVID just being on Zoom talking to coaches and players. And I remember the first game that I went to in terms of like here in Southern California was the NWSL Challenge Cup, and it was at Cal State Fullerton, and it was Angel City was playing. I don't know if they were playing against the Wave or not, but I just remember like walking into the press box there at this college stadium, which is obviously very different compared to the professional stadiums I visit. But when I opened the door to this press box, it was pretty small, but you just see a line of different reporters and people at their spots. And I walk in and just like back to back, it was like, "Hey, Jackie, how's it going?" And like people that I had talked to on Zoom or connected with online that I was now meeting in person for the first time was so wild. Or like someone said my name, they're like, "Oh, wait, you're Woman Kickballs." I'm like, "Yeah, like, what's up? Like, who are you?" And then connecting with them. And so like that's how I first connected with the people from Parkside, the owners from there. And so just like seeing all these dots connected was really cool. And that was a moment where I thought, I just walked into this room and I thought, wow, like I belong here. And that's like, to me, was just crazy because I've always been the youngest Hispanic female in a room in a press conference or whatever. And so I think too, like I can definitely be one to like doubt myself a lot and get super discouraged by that. But to walk into this room and to feel so welcomed and just, yeah, like it was just really cool. It was a really cool moment to like really soak that in and be like, yeah, like all your hard work is like now paying off, and now you're seeing that come to life. So that was a moment that was very surreal. And it was just kind of funny looking back on that too, of like our press conference setup was definitely like very DIY because like Angel City was still figuring stuff out during Challenge Cup. And so it was kind of just like a table with like a player walking up and you talking to them. So it was a very different setting. But just even through that, through COVID and different challenges, I've also seen how like those opportunities can be moments where you learn if you like choose to see it that way. Like sure, people can look at COVID and the media setup and be like, "Oh, that was so lame," or whatever. But I feel like if you leverage the opportunity and make the most of it, like only good things can come from that. So that was definitely just a time that, yeah, I feel like just shaped a lot of my career because now I know a lot more people. And that was really like the start of entering into the NWSL in Southern California, at least, because yeah, it's evolving so much.
Yeah. Well, you talk about like a couple times you mentioned like, yeah, I just showed up. I
Mhm.
just showed up. I kept showing up. Things were tough. I showed up, and some amazing things have happened from it. Is there something where like maybe heading to that first one, or maybe the first one in like, you know, the first one at like a Snapdragon type stadium where you're like, oh, this is more of like a real setup, or is it typically the same kind of the same media players everywhere you go, or do you ever go in somewhere? Obviously we have our Southern California teams, but do you hit the road somewhere else and feel like, oh my gosh, like what if I don't know so
Mhm.
and so, or like, the lay of the land kind of thing, and wanting
Right.
a sense of that belonging?
Yeah, I think that was kind of like going into the World Cup. I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. Like, I don't know, yeah, if I'm going to know people or whatever. But even there, like, I knew so many people like on the sidelines or like with FIFA, obviously it's different. Their operations are like extreme, but they have this called the Media Tribune, where all these reporters and photographers basically just have a spot to like work. Um, and so photographers will like put their equipment there before games. They'll like get their photography equipment ready. Traditional journalists will be like writing something. So you see like a lot of people in the same area. And I remember walking into like my first game this summer, being just kind of thinking like, okay, it's probably going to be a lot and overwhelming, and it might be intimidating because a lot of these people are probably older, and I'm used to being the youngest one there. And even then, there were so many people that I just recognize or see. And I think that's one of the cool things now, is that I can walk into probably almost any, like, yeah, media's, like, I don't know, setting, even in other states or other countries, and like recognize and know people. And yeah, I guess I never thought that would be possible, but there are some really great and just nice people that you get to know in terms of just colleagues. And so that was a moment where I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot going on right now, but I like know this person, or that person is getting a snack and I have talked to them or whatever. And I'm just the type of person to like go up and introduce myself to someone, whether I just know them from social media or whatever. And I try to travel like once a year to a different stadium. And same thing this past year, I went to Seattle, and like people just know, they either come up to you because they recognize you, or I get messages on social media like, hey, are you coming to this game or something? And so you can kind of just connect with people. But I think the community aspect of soccer is just really incredible. And I've learned that the soccer community is so small, like, this one person and then they know your client or like whatever. And so there's so many different realms as to just how that goes. So I think that's like the fun part of it too, is just seeing the connection from like knowing someone from Seattle and then seeing them in New Zealand for a World Cup game or something. Like it's just I feel like soccer has no boundaries in that sense because everyone's like wanting the same thing and wanting to make it better. So that's kind of the fun part is like as you grow and as you're in the media, you kind of just like meet more people and like get to partner alongside them too. So I always see it as like my colleagues are an opportunity or like a resource to collaborate and do better things with versus like seeing them as competition. Like I don't want to view them in that way and like put them below what I'm doing or whatever and vice versa. So yeah, that's kind of like the cool part of it is like wherever you go, you can kind of come into some sort of soccer people in that
Yeah.
sense.
So when you talk about like, hey, I started meeting people. I was obviously had a social media presence. We went through the COVID thing where that was the only thing that existed.
Mhm.
When did you decide like, oh, I'm going to do a physical in your hand print publication? Like, how did that come about? And I'm sure you could get into 50,000 struggles or things that popped up learning wise with it, but just like maybe share something like your favorite part of each volume. I've got both right here in front of me. They both kind of have their own aspect and theme to it. So maybe like something of each that you're like, you know what? I really loved how this came out.
Yeah, so the magazines was a total accident. Actually in 2022, I think it was April, I left my full-time job at a PR firm and I went freelance and had like a few clients here and there. And so I started, yeah, working freelance. And I remember getting my first paycheck from one of my clients and I was so bummed because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And so it was just kind of this moment where I was like, is like, what am I doing? And I was so discouraged, just thinking like, how am I gonna make it? How am I gonna, like provide for myself and like build a media company? Like, I don't even know. And so all these doubts just started coming into play. And I was driving back home. And so I sat in my car and I thought, Jackie, you can either like, sure, like go down this rabbit hole of like how much of a struggle it is to like pursue your dream, which like is very valid. It's a struggle at times. Or you can think about the thing like the skills that have brought you the most joy in your work and think about how you can incorporate that into elevating Woman Kickballs. And so I got my master's degree in journalism and I remember having this like magazine design class in that program and I really loved it. And so I thought, wait, that'd be so cool to make a soccer magazine. But I don't really know like what's the angle? And so anyways, I just started thinking about it and I was like, wait, I'm going to all of these NWSL games here in Southern California. This is a very big milestone for these teams in their inaugural season. Why not make a magazine about that? Like that's never been done before. Like having NWSL teams here and then like documenting their journeys. So I thought, why not just put to use all these like photos and these quotes and content that I already have. And so that's how the first one came about because it was super random. And I think the challenge with both of them is like just getting sponsorships for them because I have to find ways to like fund all this stuff. And so yeah, reaching out to bigger companies like Nike or like grocery stores or whatever, like having meetings with them or trying to get a hold of people. So I feel like that's always the biggest challenge, but both of them have been fully funded by sponsorships. So very, very grateful for that. And yeah, then the second one kind of just came about because it was a World Cup year. And I thought, well, like, I feel like you got to do something with the World Cup. So yeah, I think with both of them, like just seeing the way it's evolved has been really cool. And getting to really just call the shots from what stories I want to be in there is like really fun because I'll go through and but the first one I did this where I got 40 pages of like notebook paper and I was writing out like this is what this story is going to be about or this page is going to have this. And I remember quickly running out of room and like ended up just like scribbling all over these pages. I couldn't read my handwriting because I changed stuff so many times. And so like just kind of seeing the ideas and the thought process evolve has been really cool. With the World Cup volume, um I think it's one of the opening pages, but what I did is I created this graphic that shows all 60 plus NWSL players and the countries that they represent and organize them by team and whatnot. And so That was a page I wanted to include, but at first I didn't know how I was gonna make it happen because in the magazine, how it turned out is I have like the headshots of all the players, but I learned all teams have different styles of how they provide player headshots and stuff. So like trying to track all those down was interesting. But I feel like that just encompasses like the growth of women's soccer and the diversity of it too. So at first it was initially just going to be their names and not their faces, but I thought no,
Yeah.
like I think there's more power in having just that visual representation of who they are and like showing all that across the team. So that's probably one of my favorite pages from the magazine. But yeah, definitely a process. Never thought I'd be doing all that, but it's always pretty wild when I get like 10 boxes or like each box is about 45 pounds. So I get
Wow.
a lot of boxes delivered to my house when I finally go to print. So that's always like kind of funny, but yeah, that's a little bit of the process from the magazine side of things.
I've got it open right here, and I'm gonna say
Yeah,
that the spirit were the biggest challenge. Like you got like,
they're
Trinity
posing.
off to the side, like everybody's doing their own thing, and then you have our perfect, wave. Just everybody's got their own, head on headshot, some uniformity there, So, but
Totally. Even the Portland Thorns was funny because it's like literally from their shoulders up. So you're trying to like make them bigger, but it's like their head's bigger, but it's so hard. So yeah, proportions is interesting, but yeah, appreciate you noticing that because it was like, how am I supposed to get these spirit players and they're all like at different angles and
it's
stuff?
what
So
I would have never thought about it, but then I just think of like, oh, like you had to take each of these individually and
yeah,
make them like their own team photo shoot, which I would have never known that that's as much of a challenge. But as soon as you said that, I'm looking at them like
yeah,
they're
you
a
can see
problem.
it with
They're
you.
a problem.
Yeah, or like too when players as they were getting signed during the World Cup, it's like, wait, they don't have headshots with their NWSL team because they're still in New Zealand or Australia. So then trying to get creative and like think about that. So for the players that did like sign during the World Cup, I just made a separate page because I was like, there's no way I can like fully Photoshop them properly into like
Yeah.
their NWSL team. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that with the NWSL rules, so we're just gonna make it work. So
Has that been something that you've had to like kind of dive into also? Like, obviously, I think when we feel like, oh, we're a smaller scale, we can just do whatever. Have you had anything where you've run into something and somebody's been like, hey, Jackie, that's not going to fly?
oh yeah, even with the first magazine. So I reached out to the key like kind of players in the game of like the NWSL, the NWSL Players Association, and the Black Women's Player Collective. I reached out to those three groups because I wanted to like have them involved in it or like for the league side of things, kind of get their approval to make sure it was okay. Because I'd never done this before, didn't know of anyone making a magazine on this kind of stuff. So I never heard back from any of them, which was cool. So I figured, okay, like they know I'm doing this. If they really had an issue, like they would reach out and try to stop me or would flag any concerns because I reached out like numerous times. And so didn't hear anything back on that. I'm currently right now trying to like work with the NWSL on some like creative ideas of how to like sell my photos in a way that's I guess like legal because as your media you have a photography badge and on the back of it is all these legal rights of what you can and can't do with those photos. And so I reached out to them, pitched them this idea. I even talked to like the NWSL's their photo licensing provider, and they were like, yeah, you can do this, we don't have an issue with it. However, the NWSL wants to charge me like for producing certain stuff. And so it's just interesting like learning editorial rights versus commercial rights or usage. And like the magazines fall under editorial usage, so I get to do kind of like there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing, but when it comes to this idea that I have, I'm just like not hearing back from anyone and like getting told, yeah, we have to like you're going to be charged or whatever if you end up doing this. So like there's so many things and I get it like at the end of the day people have to make their money or there's certain rights, but it's like how are you going to be the NWSL and say you want to like grow the game and support women and creatively, especially with their like whole Adobe partnership that they have going on, and then here I am like bringing them this idea and it's like no, you can't do this or they're just not responding to
Yeah.
me. So like there's always going to be challenges. I think that's like one that I'm currently in, but I'm just like, well, if like I don't, it doesn't work out with them, like whatever, I'll just find a way to like either do it or not do it. So I feel like with that, it's just like a lot of problem solving because there's no rule book of like, here's what you can and can't do. It's just like you have to take what you have in front of you, which is like the photography badge that I have and the rights that are on it, and just kind of like figure out things along the way. So I'm definitely used to doing that. I'm used to people not responding to me, which is fine, but it just makes it harder. So it's like, well, things might just take longer or they'll just look different in the end. But at the end of the day, like I'm here to grow the game. And so, like, if we have similar goal in mind, like, why not work together? But yeah, it's always just kind of interesting, like, when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Have you like met or seen somebody or somebody post something? Like I have an idea in my mind of this for you, but I'd love to hear your take of like, like when you walk into a press conference, you're like, "Oh, you're Jackie, like Women Kickballs." Like have you run into somebody or has someone said something or posted something where like, "Oh my God, like I'm like they know who I am."
Yeah, I feel like that will randomly happen. I think when I did my first magazine, Alex Morgan like reposted one of my like posts about the magazine and I was like, "Whoa, this is crazy." And so like um yeah, I was just tripping out about that. And in fact, I feel like that's happened quite a bit with Alex in particular, but I remember when I was starting or before COVID, no, sorry. It was during COVID and I remember talking to this reporter who is very well known in the soccer industry. And I was kind of just like picking his brain, and he had said something to me along the lines of like, yeah, like what we do is important, but it's not like we're ever going to get a Christmas card from Alex Morgan or anything like thanking us for our work. And I was just like, okay, like cool, like I get it. Mentally I was just thinking like I'm not here to be like thanked by players, but I think they'll appreciate it. And it was just funny because earlier this year I was covering her like foundation launch event, and yeah, I remember afterwards she like I wrote an article about it and just how it was growing the game and the opportunities and just how she was like bridging this much needed gap in the soccer industry, especially for young minority kids too. And so I wrote this article. I think I tagged her in it or something. I'm sure players get lots of tags, and she like re quoted it and was like, "Thank you so much for coming out." And I remember just thinking about that conversation I initially had with that reporter, just thinking like, here you have it. Like out of all people he had mentioned was Alex Morgan, like, this Christmas card idea. And here she was thanking me for like coming to this event or whatever. And so, yeah, like things like that, or just getting to hang out with some players I know personally and whatnot. So I feel like that's always, I'm very grateful for those opportunities. It's not like why I do it to get like, X person's approval or whatever. It's just like one of the, I guess, cherries on top where you're like, oh, that's so cool that this person like appreciates this or sees this. Because yeah, there's a lot of like hard work behind it. And it's funny how like that's happened with other like colleagues that I looked up to, or like I still look up to them, but like now we're friends and whatnot. So I think that's like the really cool part of it. But it's definitely something where like you got to put in that work. It doesn't just happen like randomly because they come across something. It's usually because they have a personal relationship or a personal encounter with you and they like what you're doing and they want to, you know, like show their appreciation for it. So yeah, that kind of happens like very randomly, but that's like one example where I'm just like the irony of like this phone conversation and how things have played out in real life just cracks me up. So
Yeah. Well, I hope, maybe she'll listen to this and actually send you a real Christmas card next year. And then I hope you turn around and mail it off
I know,
to your
right?
counterpart. I was, going through all these people's stories and stuff like that. And it was shortly after like the volume one, but somebody I saw that reposted it that I was like, that I pay attention a lot to what he does. And that's Alexis Ohanian, better known
Oh,
in
yeah.
our household as Serena's husband. Uh, but he like had him like graded like in
Yeah,
a case and
hardcore.
everything, and he was like just talking about like, oh, this is gonna be a thing, like magazines are coming back, not only just magazines, but just a good condition magazine and something that's as specific as women's soccer and everything that he's doing. I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I'm him with like way
Yeah,
less money. You know what I mean?
see
Uh,
it.
I'm like, oh, I want to do so many things that like that he's doing and accomplishing, and I think it's awesome. But so as soon as I saw him with it like in a graded plastic case, I'm like, when
Hey,
Volume 2 came out, I know
you
we,
do that.
so we obviously were wanted to contribute and sponsor
Yeah, appreciate it.
somewhere in volume 2, so
There
there's
you
a
go.
little money.
Brown
But I
dog.
was like, I'm gonna have extra copies. Like they come in a plastic thing. I was like, this is my only one out of the plastic. I'm
Oh
like,
wow, yeah.
I'm gonna stow these away, because if
History right
somebody who invests in things early on and just sees the value in something, I'm like, I'm gonna stash these away. So that was like an aha moment on your behalf
there.
that I experienced of
Yeah.
the physical touching magazine.
That's cool. I'm trying to get him to buy the volume too. I've been tagging him and stuff on Twitter. So I don't know. He's a busy guy. Just had a baby, so I'm like, yeah. But I've seen him. I think I met him at a game once, and it's funny because he'll randomly like tag me or like post about me and stuff. But it's obviously different when you meet people in person versus like just seeing them on social media or whatever. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. I think you had asked me about it, and I was like, I didn't even know.
Well,
Yeah,
he's gonna listen and hear this, and then he's gonna order a box full of volume twos
I know, right?
um, as well. Um, I guess maybe our little send off here. I know there's some things that you probably don't want to talk about, and things that like you see behind closed doors. But with what's going on in women's soccer and like the expansion of the NWSL, and just where the game kind of was a handful of years ago versus where we are now, like where do you like what's Jackie's vision of like what would you like to see start to happen in the league, whether it's just the coverage aspect or more expansion, or like what would you think would be an awesome thing to continue advancing the game?
I'll start with that. I think there's so many really cool, like more quality coverage in terms of like social media and resources that they're providing, which is great. Of course, the streaming platforms and all these things that people like very much see on the front end through like the TV coverage or the social media. But like we as independent like media, I think we also experience a lot too, and it's challenging. Like I want to do so many things with interviews or things outside of a game day, and when you reach out to teams, it's like crickets. You don't hear anything. Or when I go to a game and the way that they set up maybe a photography, um, just that aspect for photographers is interesting. And now having experience from like US soccer, NWSL, and FIFA, like all these three entities have very different standards and structures. And so it's like, what is the standard? Like, and so I think that's one of the things where I really hope that NWSL can elevate their media operations in terms of like just the stuff that goes on, yes, on game day, but also like just throughout the season as well. I feel like it's so important to make sure that if you want to like elevate the success of these athletes, that you're actually doing that and not just, okay, we're going to give this interview to this big name publication versus like the other person who's going to like dozens of NWSL games and like just ignoring them. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I feel like seeing the increase, like, just production with media access is one of the biggest things. But in terms of like the actual game and the player side of it, like it would be so cool to see, like, I don't know if this is doing too much, but to see NWSL teams actually be at the same quantity or even more of MLS teams, because whenever I describe what the NWSL is to someone who has no idea what it is, as soon as you say like, or as soon as they'll ask like, oh, is that the same thing like the MLS? And you're like, yeah, but, like, in your mind, you're like, it's not the same thing because it's still on a smaller scale compared to, like, MLS or other things, so trying to, like, find a way to describe that is always challenging, but, I think to, like, almost have the NWSL be, I don't know, like, not more known, but, like, have it be, like, very more, I guess, like, normal would be really cool, and that starts with, like, yeah, having more teams in the league, so just seeing the broader, like, um players and, and teams, like what if there was an NWSL team in every state? I mean, that would be something, and California has three, so that's a bit much, but like seeing that carry across to other states would be really cool. So I feel like, yeah, expansion would definitely be one of them. But my go-to answer, of course, is always going to be the media access because there's so much like behind the scenes on that. So I feel like those would be my two like go-to answers. Just because like it's so exciting when we all get to work together to elevate this thing that's already great, but then you have all these voices and all these like additional support behind it, then it's just going to become like I don't know, it's going to become the standard at least, and so I'd hope for that to be the case. But yeah, I feel like it's definitely incredible to see the growth from when it first started out and probably a lot of empty stadiums to like now having sold out stadiums and like the Kansas City Current and the fact that they are sold out of their season ticket like holder options. I mean, what a great problem to have. So like hopefully there's more like good problems like that we can have in the NWSL because yeah, it would just be so cool to see that be more present.
Yeah, well, you think of the expansion and trying to grow this thing as
Mhm.
fast and smart, as you
Yeah.
can, and adding another two teams for the upcoming season is like awesome, especially after we just added our Southern California
Mhm.
teams, two seasons ago. So that's cool, and I think when you mentioned Kansas City and selling out those, that stadium,
Mhm.
like that's what people need is like they built it for the team and people were excited about that. And I think that's one of those things where like if you build it, they will come kind of thing. Like
Mhm.
let's not be playing on a playground type thing. Like let's
Yeah.
have real stadiums and like awesome, amenities, not just for people to go to the game, but like for the women to have behind the scenes, like
Mhm.
locker rooms and facilities, all of that. I think that's like a super solid step one is give the players what they want and like this thing will go. Like we've had, San Diego specifically, like when you and LA come to town, like
Mhm.
the upper deck is like filled. Like we're doing 27,000 plus people at those games. It's
Mhm.
like people want to be there, and the product on the field is good. And I think if you just give people what they want, like they'll show up, and that's been kind of the theme down here.
Yeah, for sure. Even too, like thinking of that kind of SoCal rival, like my family, their first NWSL game was the September 17th game at Snapdragon, and to this day, they will still talk about it. And like, mind you, of course, they are very like invested in what I do, so they know of certain things. But it's just like so crazy to hear them be like, "Oh yeah, that goalkeeper, like Caitlin Sheridan, like she's so good." Blah blah. Blah. I'm like, well, like you remember her name, like just kind of seeing that like excitement about it. And so it's like really cool just to see that, and I feel like it's gonna grow so much with just in Northern California. I mean, Utah is kind of like I don't know, it's an interesting location, but like just how it's growing is so exciting to see. So I feel like when I think of Utah, I think back to the Challenge Cup and how they were playing games and there was like a playground in the background and everyone was so focused on that playground, the slide. So who knows, maybe that'll come back this next season. But yeah, like it's just so cool to see the ways that people are getting fascinated with the women's game, but it really starts by just either experiencing one or like just by being educated in a way where like that's the whole thing with Woman Kickballs is like I hated paywalls because not everyone can access that. Like a newer fan is not going to want to pay like $5.99 a month to like read an article to learn about this thing. Like they probably will get to that place once they experience something, but initially like they just want to be like educated and like want to know kind of the basics. So I feel like there's so many exciting opportunities to see that grow in this next year. So yeah, who knows? It'll be definitely a busy and just a wild season, but I'm
Yeah.
excited for it.
Well, we'll link up a bunch of your stuff in like the show notes and stuff, but why don't you just shout out like, the social handles where we can get volume 2 of the magazine and all of that so we make sure we support.
Yeah, for sure. So all of my work or like social media accounts is just Woman Kickballs on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, or X it's called. Sorry, I keep forgetting. Threads, all that good stuff is just at Woman Kickballs. And then to get my articles, you can subscribe to womankickballs.com, and that's also where I have my store where you can get magazines or different merch that I come out with. And yeah, anytime someone subscribes, I send them a handwritten note and a sticker and a trading card if I have some. So you can get that for free by just signing up to my newsletter. So yeah, and throughout the season, I'll be posting just mean, it's going to be busy this season, but I'll be posting different recaps of all the games that are happening. So that's what my newsletter entails. But yeah, that's where you can find me. So looking forward to connecting with some new peeps on there.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know you're swamped and catching up on a bunch of stuff, so we'll let you go. But appreciate the time, and we'll catch you at a game this season.
Yeah, thanks so much. Looking forward to it.